Today I want to go over the subject concerning the controversy over the Gate of Mercy, the East Gate in Jerusalem at the Holy Place. I will go ahead and get started with screen share. And we will go to the times of Israel. Palestinians ripped doors off disputed building on Temple Mount. So let me give you a little bit of background information. I would say for about the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe, this controversy has been going on. Since, what was it, 2005 or 2006, Israel shuttered that door, and rightly so. Let me explain. Ezekiel 44. This particular gate is assigned to Messiah the Prince. We'll start in verse 1. Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, which looked toward the east, and it was shut. Why? Then Jehovah, not the Lord is the name of Baal, a false god. Jehovah is his name. Said unto me, this gate shall be shut. It's again, back in 2005 and 2006. The state of Israel shut that gate, and rightly so. It shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because Jehovah, the Elohim of Israel. Well, let me go to Strong's Concordance to prove my point here. Because Jehovah, learn it, establish it in your heart, and say it. The Elohim of Israel has entered in by it, therefore it shall be shut. It is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before Jehovah. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same. Now, if we continue in Ezekiel 44, we see that there are certain things that the people of Israel did that caused Jehovah to leave the holy place, to leave Jerusalem, and to allow Israel to be taken into captivity. Let's examine this. And you're going to see some similarities going on today. Then he brought me by the way of the north gate before the house, and I looked, and behold, the glory of Jehovah filled the house of Jehovah, and I fell on my face. And Jehovah said unto me, Son of man, mark this well, and look with your eyes, and hear with your ears all that I say unto you concerning all the ordinances of the house of Jehovah, all the laws thereof, and mark well the entering in of the house, and every going forth of the sanctuary. You shall say to this rebellious, even to the house of Israel, Thus saith Jehovah Elohim, you house of Israel, let it suffice unto you of all your abominations. All right, folks, are you ready? In that you brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary to pollute it. Even my house, when you offer my bread, the fat and the blood, and they have broken my covenant because of all of your abominations, and you have not kept the charge of my holy things, but you have set keepers of my charge and my sanctuary for yourselves. In other words, you brought in Gentiles to be keepers of the house. There were not Israelites, that were not that were neither circumcised of the flesh nor circumcised of the heart. And right here, this is how the old covenant was broken. Verse 9, thus saith Jehovah Elohim, no stranger uncircumcised in heart and no uncircumcised in the flesh shall enter into my sanctuary, or any stranger that is among the children of Israel. Starting to see some more similarities here, don't you? And the Levites that are gone away far from me when Israel went astray, which went astray away from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. All right, let's stop right here. So, by allowing the heathen to run around the holy place, and even worse, destroy the east gate. Who's responsible for this? Is it the nation of Israel? Or is it the Christian nations? You see, the Christian nations, through the UN General Assembly, claim to be the custodians of Jerusalem. We'll look at the UN General Assembly resolutions, Resolution 303, in December 9, 1949. In spite of the vehement opposition of Israel and Jordan, the General Assembly restates its aim that Jerusalem be placed under a permanent international regime. In other words, regime of the Goyim. And the trustees' council was called upon to prepare a statute for the city. The resolution was adopted by 38 votes in favor, 14 against, 7 abstentions, mostly of the Catholic, Muslim, and communist states voted for. Canada, Costa Rica, Denmark, Guatemala, Iceland, Israel, Norway, South Africa, Sweden, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States, and Uruguay and Yugoslavia voted against. Chile, the Dominican Republic, Honduras, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Panama, and Thailand abstained. So the UN General Assembly voted to Jerusalem be placed under a permanent international regime and trusteeship council. At that point, these nations here, including the United States, should have, in protest, left the United Nations and telling them they were not going to participate in this outrage. But they didn't. That's a problem. The General Assembly, having regard to its Resolution 181 of the 29th of November, 1947, and Resolution 194 of it, December 11th, 1948, having studied the reports of the United Nations Conciliation Commission for Palestine set up under the latter resolution, decides in relation to Jerusalem, believing that the principles underlying its previous resolutions concerning this matter, and in particular its resolution of the 29th of November 1947, represent a just and equitable settlement of the question. Number one, to restate, therefore, its intention that Jerusalem should be placed under a permanent international regime, which should envisage appropriate guarantees for the protection of the holy places, both within and outside Jerusalem, and to confirm specifically the following provisions of the General Assembly Resolution 181. Number one, it should read A. I don't know why they did it this way. The city of Jerusalem shall be established as a corpus separatum. Notice that's in Latin or Roman language. It's not lost on me. Under a special international regime and shall be administered by the United Nations. Number two, the trusteeship council shall be designated to discharge the responsibilities of the administered authority. And number three, the city of Jerusalem shall include the present municipality of Jerusalem plus the surrounding villages and towns, and the most eastern of which shall be Abu Dis, the most southern Bethlehem, the most western Ein Kerem, including also the built-up areas of Motzah, and most northern Shufat, as indicated on the attached sketch map Annex B. Number two of, like I said, they should have done, when they did number one, they should have done A and B and C, and then number two. To request for this purpose that the trustee council, as its next session, whether special or regular, complete the preparation of the Statute of Jerusalem, omitting the now inapplicable provisions such as Articles 32 and 39, and without prejudice to the fundamental principles of the international regime for Jerusalem set forth in the General Assembly Resolution 181, introducing therein amendments in the direction of its greater democratization. Notice what I pointed out in one of my previous videos, just you have been Hellenized. That one, that democracy and Republican form of government, specifically democracy, comes from Greece and democracy is the enemy of the kingdom of Israel. Democratization approved the statute and proceeded immediately with its implementation. The trusteeship council shall not allow any actors taken by any interested government or governments to divert it from adopting an implementation of the Statute of Jerusalem. So, in short, the Goyim, the nations, put Jerusalem, the entirety, under their guardianship, under their control in 1947 and 1948. All right, let's go then to, not this one. What did I do wrong here? What happened? Let's see. I'll have to find it again. All right. All right, I think this is it. Look at all these United Nations resolutions concerning, as they say, Palestine. Let's look at 1967. 2253 and 2254. We'll look at those. On July the 4th, 1967, the General Assembly adopted a Pakistani draft on the situation in Jerusalem. The resolution was adopted by a vote of 99 in favor, none against, 20 abstentions, and 3 absent. Now, what I have learned, folks, is this. I think, let's see here. All right, Resolution 2253, 1967. 2253, 1967. All right. So now you have a list of nations in favor. All right. And you're going to see how this comes about. Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Botswana, Brazil, Bulgaria, Burma, Burundi, Belarus, Cambodia, Cameroon, Canada, Ceylon, Chad, Chile, China, Congo, Costa Rica, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Finland, France, Cambia, Ghana, Greece, Guatemala, Guinea, Guyana, Honduras, Hungary, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Ireland, Ivory Coast, Japan, Jordan, Kuwait, Laos, Lebanon, Lesotho, Libya, Luxembourg, Madagascar, Malaysia, Mali, Mauritania, Mexico, Mongolia, Morocco, Nepal, Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Norway, Pakistan, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Philippines, Poland, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Singapore, Somalia, Spain, Sudan, Sweden, Syria, Thailand, Togo, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Turkey, Uganda, Ukraine, USSR, United Arab Republic, which was Egypt, United Kingdom, United Republic of Tanzania, Upper Volta, Venezuela, Yemen, Yugoslavia, and Zambia. So these are all the nations that voted for this resolution. What does this resolution say? The General Assembly, deeply concerned at the situation prevailing in Jerusalem as a result of the measures taken by Israel to change the status of the city. Number one, considers that these measures are invalid. You know what Israel did in 1967, don't you? After they were attacked, they took Jerusalem, which belonged to them. These nations were against what Israel did. Number two, calls upon Israel to rescind all measures already taken to desist forthwith from taking any action that would alter the status of Jerusalem. Number three, request the Secretary General to report to the General Assembly and the Security Council on the situation on the implementation of the present resolution not later than 1 week from its adoption. Before I forget, let's see the nations who abstained. Australia, Barbados, Bolivia, Central African Republic, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Dahomey, Gabon, Iceland, Italy, Jamaica, Kenya, Liberia, Malawi, Malta, Portugal, Rwanda, South Africa, United States, and Uruguay. Something amiss here. Okay. These nations who voted for this resolution, 2253 of the 4th of July, 1967, are Israel haters. The ones who abstained from the vote are lukewarm. Lukewarm, folks. You should read in Revelation 3 Let's go there. And to the angel of the church of Laodicea, write these things, says the truly faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of Jehovah. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I would that you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm, tepid, can't make a stand. Neither cold nor hot, I will spew, vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich and increase with goods, and have need of nothing. And you do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that you may be rich and white and have white raiment, and that you may be clothed, and that the shame of your nakedness do not appear. Anoint your eyes with eye salve, so that you might see. Now, in other words, abstention is not an option. It's a wrong option that will be rejected. Now, I have got to find, because I had right in my grasp, I think it's right. Is it right here? No, it's not. But here's a long list of United Nations General Assembly resolutions concerning, as they claim, Palestine. You see, long list. And I can tell you the vast majority of them are anti-Israel. You can just pick one. Just pick one. Condemns Israel, condemns Israel, deplores Israel, condemns Israel, deplores Israel, condemns Israel, condemns Israel, condemn. It's all you see. The UN is responsible for this, the United Goy. And where is the United Goyim headquarters located? I have for years been yelling at the United States to get the United Nations headquarters out of the United States. But of course, who listens to me? Nobody. But I'm on record, in case anybody should ever wonder, that the United States should have kicked the United Nations out of this country a long time ago. But because they have not, they bear the sin. The United States bears the sin of the United Nations Security Council. And so does every other Goyim nation. Folks, I have to tell you, it's just this to me. I look down through here and it's disgusting. It's despicable. It's nauseating. And the Christian nations that are ahead of this whole thing, that started this whole thing called the United Nations, claim to be the people of the book. They claim to be holders of the new covenant. Well, you see, folks, going back to Ezekiel 44, Going back to Ezekiel 44, this is exactly how ancient Israel broke the old covenant. By having strangers as the guardians of the keepers of the holy place. I pointed this out. See, folks, here's the thing. I do not have the power to condemn. Okay? But by flagrantly violating the holy place, by flagrantly violating the words of Jehovah in Ezekiel 44, covenant breakers, breakers of the new covenant, the Goyim have become the nations, the United Nations. And so, since they violated the new covenant will be ripped away from the Gentiles and be given to Israel. Jeremiah 31. At that time, saith Jehovah, I will be the Elohim of all the tribes of Israel. Every one of them. So you folks, you want to say that Dan is rejected? You're lying. You lie. Thus saith Jehovah, the people which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness, even Israel, when I went to cause them to rest. Jehovah has appeared of old to me, saying, yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness I have drawn you. Again, I will build you, and you shall be built, O Virgin of Israel, and you shall be adorned with your tabrets, and you shall go forth in the dances that make merry. You will plant vines upon the mountains of Samaria. The nations, the Goyim says, no, you won't. Jehovah says, yes, you will. Who do you think, which one is going to win this argument? The planters will indeed plant and shall eat them as normal things. Yes, they're going to plant in Judea and Samaria, and they're going to eat that fruit like they do every other place in Israel. For there shall be a day that the watchmen upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, shall yell, shout on top of their lungs, arise and let us go to Zion unto Jehovah our Elohim. For thus saith Jehovah, sing with gladness for Jacob's sake, and shout among the chief of nations. And publish, praise you, and say, Jehovah, save your people. From who? From the chief of nations. Save your people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coastlands of the earth, Mediterranean Sea, and the ends of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travails with child together. A great company shall return there. Not like what we saw in the 40s, not like what we saw in the 60s, not like what we saw in the 70s or the 80s. No, this is going to make that Exodus look small. They shall come with weeping and with supplications. Will I lead them? I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father. And of course, the Christian today says, no, he's not. To Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Jehovah, you goyim, and declare it to the coastlands afar. That's the United States too. He that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock, because Jehovah has redeemed Jacob and ransomed him from the hand of him that was stronger than he. Who is that? The united goyim, the united nations. Therefore, they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, yes, in Jerusalem, against the wishes of the goyim, and shall flow together to the goodness of Jehovah for wheat and wine and oil and the young of the flock and the herd, and the soul shall be as a watered garden, and they shall not sorrow any more at all. Oh, where have we read this? I will show you. All right, Revelation. Well, hold on. We'll look at all of them. You see this, folks? We were just in Jeremiah 31:16, were we not? Now we can go and tie the scriptures together. Revelation 7 and verse 17. He said he's going to lead them by streams of water. Did he not? Did we not just read that? They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them. Means they won't hunger anymore. And shall lead them into living fountains of waters, and Jehovah shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, which means there will be no more sorrow. And who is this? The great number, a great multitude which no man could number, that were taken out of all the nations, kindreds, and peoples, and tongues. That's Israel. That's Jeremiah 31:16, folks. Let's go back there again, shall we? Okay, verse 12. And they shall not sorrow any more at all. Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young and old men together, and I will turn them mourning into joy and comfort them and make them rejoice from their sorrow. This is about Israel. The scripture cannot change, folks. You cannot replace Israel with the church. No. And I will satiate the soul of the Kohanim with fatness, and my people shall be satisfied with my goodness, says Jehovah. Thus saith Jehovah, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel, weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were there no longer. Thus saith Jehovah, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work shall be rewarded, saith Jehovah, and they shall come back again from the land of who? The enemy. All right, folks, I have some terrible things to tell you. Where are most of the Jews and Israelites today? Well, first of all, in order to find out where the majority of the Israelites are today, you have to find out where the majority of the Jews are today. Well, the majority of the Jews today are not in Israel. Unfortunately, the majority of the Jews are in the United States. Therefore, the majority of the Jews, of the majority of the lost tribes of Israel, are also in the United States. So what does that make the United States? I know people will claim that the United States has been Israel's friend. No, that's not. What the United States have been doing is not, or is the least of which, Israel's friend. The Bible says, from the land of their enemy, right here. You see, by abstaining in the 2253 and 2254 resolutions of 1967 that by default made the United States Israel's enemy. He is going to bring them all again from the land of the enemy. So United Nations Security Council headquarters is in the United States. Now, folks, do not misunderstand me. The biggest enemies of the United States are still in Europe, Roman Europe. But make no mistake about it, Western civilization is the enemy of Israel. And so are all the nations that surround Israel today. Number 17, there is hope in your end, saith Jehovah, that your children shall come again to their own border. So you cannot separate this particular scripture, Jeremiah. You cannot separate Jeremiah 31 from Revelation 7. Let's see if I can get there again. 7 verse 17 or Revelation 21 verse 4. And I saw, verse 1, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more Mediterranean Sea adjacent to the land of Israel. Why? Well, when you read through this here, it is described that the New Jerusalem pushes halfway into the Mediterranean Sea. And John saw, Yohanan saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out from Elohim, out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard with a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of Jehovah is with men, and he shall dwell with them. Which men? Why do you think that John didn't say Israel? John had to be careful with his words. And indeed, the book of Revelation is written, and his visions were written, how do I say, in parable? Think about it. And he that sat on the throne said, who sits on the throne? Jehovah the Father said, behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, write these things, write, for these words are true and faithful. He said unto me, it is done. I am Alpha and Omega. Who is? Jehovah. The beginning and the end. I will give him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. And he that overcomes shall inherit all things. The Father will be his Elohim, and he will be my son. So who is the Alpha and Omega? The Father. But the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake of fire which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And we see the New Jerusalem. And what is in the New Jerusalem, folks? Verse 12. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names thereon written, which were the names of the 12 tribes of each, 12 of each of the tribes of the children of the Gentiles. How dare the United Nations declare themselves the keeper, guardians of Jerusalem? How dare they? Each of the tribes of the children of Israel. On the east, 3 gates, on the north, 3 gates, on the south, 3 gates, and on the west, 3 gates. And that the wall of the city had 12 foundations, in them the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And this coming Passover, no, Easter is not Passover. Easter is in honor of the sun god and his unrighteous, whorish mother, Ishtar and Baal. Baal being the sun god, the god of child sacrifice, which Christians today around the world honor. But this coming Passover, I will be conferring with my mom and dad, going over the scripture concerning the new covenant that Yehoshua Messiah talked about with the apostles, what they will be ruling over the 12, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. We'll go to Luke 22, verse 30 first. 30. This is the one let's see. All right. I want to make sure that I get my scripture straight here. 22 verse 30. All right. Let's do this. Verse 14. This is the one scripture that myself, my mom, my dad will confer together over. And when the hour was come, and he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not any more eat this bread thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of Jehovah. And he took the cup and gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of Jehovah shall come. And he took bread and gave thanks, and he broke it and gave unto them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, this is the cup of the New Testament? No, folks, please. Let's go to Strong's Concordance again. Covenant. Look at it. Let's examine the word, folks. A covenant between two parties or multiple parties. It is a new covenant. Now, let's stay on the same track, folks. The new covenant. New covenant for what? In my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of him that betrays me is at the table. And truly the Son of Man goes, as it was determined, but woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. And they begun to inquire of themselves, who would do this thing? Then they started discussing who is the greatest. Verse 24, and there also was strife among them, which shall be accounted the greatest. And he said unto them, the kings of the Gentiles do this, exercise lordship over them. And he said, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors, but you shall not do this at all. But he that is greatest among you must be as the younger, and he as chief shall be as a servant. For whether is greater, him that sits at meat or him that serves? Is not he that sits at meat, but I am among you as he that serves. You that have continued with me in my temptations, I will appoint you a kingdom, just like my Father appointed unto me, that you may eat and drink at my table, this eating and drink of the new covenant. You see, we just read about that here. The new covenant. This is the cup which is the new covenant in my blood, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on the throne judging the 12 tribes of the Goyim. Is that what it says? Well, Europe would have you believe that. Yeah, it would. Oh, you don't believe what I'm saying? Let me show you something. Look at this. The European Union flag. Count the stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A circle of 12 pointed yellow stars. Yes. They practice replacement theology in their churches and in their states. You see. "12 tribes of Israel." That is the new covenant, folks. For any Gentile, if they want to be partakers of the new covenant, they have to walk in one of the gates of the New Jerusalem, one of the 12 gates of the 12 tribes of Israel, just as Rahab came in through Judah, through the tribe of Judah, just as, what is her name? Ruth. She also came through the tribe of Judah. All right. So, and with them, oh yes, you'll find that also in Romans 11. With them partake. With them partake. Right there. Proof. It is in Romans 11 and verse 17. This is where Paul is saying, has Jehovah cast away his people? Jehovah forbid. Okay. I say, have they stumbled that they should fall? Israel? Jehovah forbid. But rather, because they fell, salvation is also come to the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. And that's backed up in the old, in the prophets. It is. Moses talked about that. Now, if the temporary fall of them be the riches of the Gentiles, and the diminishing of them, the riches of the Gentiles, how much more shall their fullness be? The Gentiles claim that there will be no fullness, and they're going to stand in the way of the fullness. They have acted as Israel's enemy. For I speak to you Gentiles, as I am the apostle of Gentiles, I magnify my office, if by any means I may provoke any of them to emulation, which are my flesh, to save some of them in that particular generation, because that generation rejected Messiah he's speaking of. Now let's look at verse 17. And if some of the branches, well, Gentiles claim that all of the branches were broken off. That's a lie. If some of the branches were broken off, and you being from a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and you Gentiles, you can't say with them, can you? What's wrong with you? You ought to be ashamed of yourselves, looking down upon the Jews this way. Shame, shame, shame on all of you. With them, alongside them, hand in hand with them, partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. But the Gentiles don't do that, do they? Boast not against the branches, what have they done? Not only have they boasted against the branches, they have been blocking the door to the kingdom, and the United States of America has been acting like Laodicea in Revelation 3. Half-hearted. And this peace plan of the century is just one more proof of that. And Paul warns the Gentiles that if they do boast against the branches, you're boasting against the root, which is Yehoshua, Messiah. And indeed they do. Not only do they boast against Yehoshua, Messiah, they dare to change his name to a name of blasphemy and then demand that he answer to that name. That's not repentance. That's trying to make the Messiah conform to you. No, that's not how it works. You have to conform to the Messiah, whose name is Yehoshua, whose name honors the Father, Jehovah. If you don't conform, you are unrepentant. You are the one that has to change, not him. He does not change. He will not change for you. You have to change for him. And he's not going to change his name for you just because you don't like a Hebrew name. Just because you prefer the name of a false idol. And if he spared not the natural branches, do you think that he's going to spare you? Look at the severity and the goodness of Jehovah on them which fell severity temporarily, as we see in Jeremiah 31. Temporarily. But towards you goodness, if. Yes, that word if. If you continue in his goodness. Well, guess what, folks? The UN resolutions that I showed you today, by themselves, not to mention that all the horrible things that the Gentiles have done to the Jews throughout the past couple of millennia. But the UN resolutions alone are enough to condemn all the goyim around the world. If you continue in his goodness, otherwise you too shall be cut off. Look, it's not me that made this statement. It was Paul. Paul, the only apostle to the Gentiles, warned the Gentiles, the Romans, and all Western civilization that if you do not continue in his goodness, the Gentiles would be cut off. Well, guess what? I want you to take a look around you and ask yourself a question. Have the Gentiles as nations continued in goodness? Be honest. Take a look through history and ask yourself why millions, perhaps billions of innocent people, why their blood has been shed in these lands. And then ask yourself again, have the Gentiles continued in Jehovah's goodness? The answer is an emphatic no. Therefore, Paul's words, yes, Paul, the only apostle to the Gentiles, cannot be disputed. He himself said it. Since the other 12 apostles were the apostles to the 12 tribes of Israel, Paul said they, the Gentiles, would be cut off, and they will be. The Gentiles shall be cut off. Yes. And they, the Jews, on all Israel, not just the Jews, but as we just read in Jeremiah 31, all of the tribes of Israel, they will no longer abide in unbelief. And they shall be grafted in again, because Jehovah is able to do so. Because you Gentiles, you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature. How much more then shall these, being of the natural branches, go back to their own olive tree? Folks. And this is the reason why I always go to Romans 11, 25 through 27. And 28, quite frankly. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until what? Until the time of the Gentiles come to an end. Now, you're going to say, well, wait a minute. That's not what it says. Well, actually, it is what it says, because I'm going to show you something here. Actually, I will just go use this. Here. In Matthew, why are there so many? I think it's in Matthew 25. Hold on. Let me get rid of this before it leads me astray. I know it's in Matthew 25. Certain of it. Well, this is the sheep and the goats. Hold on. I'm just trying to remember how this, it's in here. Abomination. Let's see here. I'm going to keep that. Oh, it's in Luke 21:24. All right. 21:24. Verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, Titus the Roman general, 67 AD, read all about it. Then you know that its desolation is near. Let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Those who did survive, those who did not survive. And let them which are in the midst of it depart. And let them not which are in the country enter into the city. Because these be the days of vengeance, that all the things which are written might be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and them which give suck in those days, for them shall be great distress in the land of Israel, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away into captive into all the nations, which they are in today still. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, which it is still partly to this day. And when Israel is slowly receiving back Jerusalem, the Gentiles are protesting and standing in the way of the new covenant, blocking the door to the kingdom. Until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled, and that word is finished or come to an end. So, Romans 11, for I would not, brethren, that you should, verse 25, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness is in part happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. So as you see, this is tied in with Luke 21, verse 24. Then what happens? 25, verses 25 through 28 goes exactly alongside Romans 11, verse 26. And there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth distress of the Goyim, not distress of Israel. No. Distress of the Goyim, the distress of the nations, for perplexity to see, and the waves are roaring men's hearts. What? Whose hearts? The Gentiles. Failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, where the powers of heaven shall be shaken, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. For what reason, folks? For what reason? And then when these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads. Who is going to look up and lift up their heads? For their redemption is nigh. Paul says, and so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my new covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Let's read, continue reading. Actually, I think, oh yes, let's do this. Verse 34, take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with sin. Since he's talking about the Israelites, and any among the Gentiles who are believers in the last days, when the script is about to be flipped back to Israel, we are not to have our hearts overcharged with surfeiting, with vomiting drunkenness. No, he's not even talking about regular drunkenness. No, he's talking about vomiting and drunkenness. And the cares of this life. The cares of this life. Will the cares of this life go from the internet, your mortgage, to even burying the dead? Yes. Don't let any of those things get in the way so that that day come upon you unawares. Because as a snare, one day it will be like today, where Western civilization is at ease, and the next day it will be like this. Verse 25. Signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity and the seas and waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear. One day it will be normal, pristine, calm. The next day, men's hearts failing them for fear. It will happen just like that. For as a snare shall come upon all of them that dwell upon the face of the earth. Watch therefore and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, to stand before the Son. Who's going to escape? Who's going to escape? Paul. Words of Paul. And so, verse 25, and so all Israel shall be saved. As is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my new covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes. So who are the enemies of Israel? That Jehovah talked about in Jeremiah 31, where he's going to save Israel from their enemies, the Roman Gentiles. But concerning the election, they are the beloved for the patriarchs' sakes. Election. Let's look at this. We will go to, I believe we go back to Matthew 24. When the time of the Gentiles comes to an end, or in other words, when Israel's tribulation is officially over, shall the sun and the moon be darkened, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Yes, it will come upon the earth as a snare. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will not be clapping and shouting for joy. The Gentiles will be mourning. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the cloud of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect. Who are the elect? We just read in Romans 11 who the elect are. Israel, for the patriarch's sake. They are the elect. I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. From the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. It will come like a snare in an instant. Folks, the enemy of Israel is the United Nations. United Nations Security Council headquarters is in the United States. The vast majority of Israel is located in the United States of America. Therefore, along with all of the other nations, the chief of the nations, the United States of America, is Israel's enemy. I hope we have all learned something from this. And it is okay. I don't care if any of you want to go ahead and you want to play this video. during your Passover service, that's fine. However, I would rather you read it out for yourself. Just copy the scriptures that I quoted today and read it among yourselves. I do not, honestly, I don't like my video, my picture being broadcast on YouTube, but at this point in time, because of the necessity to put on this yellow star on behalf of all of those Jews who were persecuted and murdered by the Christians, I feel it necessary to do so as a testimony against Christian nations around the world, especially Europe.